So, hello everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment Podcast, in partnership, as always, with our good friends over at Operation Smile. So I'm delighted to welcome Angela to the podcast today, as my colleague Rose has mentioned. So hopefully you can still hear and see me okay, Angela?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's great.
So whereabouts in the world do we find you today?
I'm in the Lake District in the south of the lakes in Kendal in Cumbria.
Nice. Oh, awesome.
It's dry but overcast today.
That's it. So the typical weather for the UK at this time of year, we're recording this at the end of January, so it's fairly standard UK weather, I think, for this time of year.
Yeah, pretty much so. Quite cold.
So, I mean, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we record these podcasts in partnership with Operation Smile. And for any of the audience who don't know who they are and what they do, they're a medical charity that help children in developing countries who are born with cleft lip and palate issues, and they go out on a voluntary basis and help these children over there. And I thought, given the name of the company, Operation Smile, it's always nice to start the podcast with a nice light-hearted question to ease you into this. So I wondered what the last thing was that made you smile, Angela.
It's one of my granddaughters, actually. She's very active. She's into everything, misses nothing. Mm-hmm. She's not quite 3 years old, and she's at that point where she's testing all of her boundaries, and she'll watch you as she's doing things. And she's quite cheeky. You can almost see her brain working out how best to get her own way. But it always makes me smile watching her develop. Although we can't always let her see that she's making us smile. And she's also very polite, and her little "thank you, Grandma," quite heartwarming, even if I think she is being a bit tongue-in-cheek at times.
It's nice to see, and we usually find that the thing that makes people smile the most is usually related to children, and it's always nice to have them around. And I think usually making you laugh and smile at the things they say and do. And obviously, we're recording this, as I mentioned earlier, at the end of January, and we're just into the new year. And I know you're big into goal setting and setting targets. So is there any particular goals or targets you've set yourself for 2022?
I think in the main, for this year, I need to get strong again. That's my prime target. The COVID restrictions, not being able to get into the hills as much as I might have liked, also coming closely on the back of me having finished running John O'Groats to Land's End. So I was taking a period of time out to recover from that, mean that I have lost a fair bit of strength and conditioning, as it were. So I think my main focus for this year is going to be getting strong again. So I'm back in the gym. I'm doing a bit of running. I've had some knee injuries, but they're resolved now. So it's about working with my body and getting back. I do have one or two challenges I'm hoping to do this year. I was having run sort of north to south in the country. I was hoping to run from side to side as well, coast to coast, west to east. So I'm looking at maybe doing that as a personal challenge a bit later.
Wow. And then, that's pretty impressive. Huh? That's
No, but I need to get myself into a position where I actually feel strong enough to take that on properly it's basically to see how fast I can do it. I've done it twice before, and I know I can better that time. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Wow! So watch this space. There could be more to come by the end of this year. That's really cool. And I think obviously, as Rose mentions, one of the things that I thought would be really good to speak to you about today is the achievements that you've had, which we'll come on to. But before we go into that, obviously you came into running quite a later stage in your life. I think it was the age of 53 when you eventually started, putting the training shoes on and going out for runs. And I just thought, what was it that changed your attitude to running and fitness in general at that age? Because it's a huge change to make for anybody, really, at any age. So at the age of 53 to do it must have been quite challenging. So I thought I'd find out what the origin was of what drove you to start this in the first place, really.
Yes. I think I'd probably preface it by saying that people will generally make changes when they see a personal benefit from doing so. It's certainly something I found as the running granny. It's very difficult to motivate people if they don't perceive a benefit to themselves to making a change. About 16 years ago, when I was 47, our family had 3 family members ill all at the same time, and seriously ill. And sadly, each of them died within a 4-month period. And the last one of those to die was my husband. We weren't together at the time, but we'd remained lifelong friends. And I'd sort of been with him and seen him through this awful period where he'd had a brain tumour. Anyway, afterwards I took 2 weeks leave, and then I buried myself in work. So rather than grieving, and I took on more and more projects, and with children and at home and a home to look after as well, this left no time for me. I should add, actually, that this will not be an unfamiliar story to many people. Between the ages of 40 and 60, as they have family members who become increasingly frail and ill and need, increasing care. Anyway, for me, over the next couple of years, not only was I overworked, but I became quite overweight, unfit, and increasingly unhappy. And I kept getting glimpses of this person and not really doing anything about it. But I didn't recognise them. And eventually I thought, if I don't look after myself and make some changes, then I'm not going to be fit to look after anybody else if they need me. So I started taking what I now call my small steps. And I printed, I think on my website, I published in very, very short form 30 of those small steps. And initially, I went for a walk every evening, only about 10 to 15 minutes at a time. And I even felt guilty about doing that because there's always more stuff to do, isn't there? There are more emails to answer, the children, spending time with the children, feeling that there's stuff in the house you should be doing. But I worked through that. And I was very short of breath and I couldn't walk very fast. And it just felt like hard work all round. But I pushed through it and started to feel a bit better. The breathing got easier. And even, without trying, some of the weight came off. I started going for a bit longer and so on. And so alongside the walking, I looked at other things like what I was eating, what I was drinking, my social contacts with whom I'd completely lost touch over the years, and also increasing my physical activity. Anyway, this was 2009 to about 2011. And late in 2011, I saw an advert from a lady who was setting up a mature ladies running group. I made a note of the number, thinking, that might be something I do. But it took me about 3 weeks before I could call, because I had what I call my 20 ways to kill an idea. I'll be too slow. I'll be at the back. I'll hold everybody up. I'll look ridiculous. What will people think? We all have that, don't we? When we think about anything that's going to make us step outside our comfort zone. But anyway, eventually I did ring and I joined her group, and I found the most inspirational lady. She was, at the time, she was 67. 66. But she'd started running when she was 62. Anyway, at that particular point, she was 67, and she was training. I learned that she was training to do a mountain challenge, something called the Joss Naylor Lakeland Challenge, which involves running for 48 miles over the Lake District Fells along a particular route, which takes in 30 summits and 17,000 feet of ascent. And it's an age-related challenge. So at her age, over 65, she would have 24 hours to do it. You can't do it till you're 50, and at 50 as a male you have 12 hours to do it, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah,
but people do it. As a woman aged 50, you've got 14 hours to do it, and then it goes up every 5 years. So for me at the moment, that is something I'm thinking about maybe doing this year, and for me I would have 18 hours to do it. But anyway, that's I'd forgotten about that. That's another thing I might do. So I was intrigued, as well as also somewhat concerned, that this lady was out there on the fells wrecking this route on her own. And I offered to go with her. Anyway, I did, and we actually became very good friends. And through supporting her and going up into the hills and reminding myself how to navigate and so on, I found my passion for lifelong running, for sort of long distance running through that friendship. And I supported her when she did her successful completion of that at the age of 68, and she was at that time the oldest female to have done so. So yes, that's how I got into running.
Wow, it's really, really impressive. And I think, one of the things you mentioned there that's really interesting is taking the small steps each day, and I think it's something that's, if someone has said to you, right, after a short period of time now and go run a half marathon or a marathon, you may or may not have done it. But if you had, you probably would have, come back with a lot of aches and pains, and it could have put you off running for good. But actually, by taking the small steps each time and gradually, building the resistance up and building the muscle and the strength, it then clearly obviously led to bigger things. But also maybe a challenge within that, and I think it's the same with lots of ways of life. By taking small steps and a lot of repetition, sometimes maybe the boredom can sometimes creep in if you're doing the same thing, on a regular basis. It's one of the things that stops people, achieving more in any chosen area. So how did you get past those things, whether it was boredom, whether it was the certain days where you just got out of bed and thought, I really don't want to do this today? I mean, what was it that drove you through those moments?
Well, we're only human, so we do backslide every now and again, don't we? So I think one of the most important things about taking small steps is that those small steps are, you set yourself goals that are actually easily achievable within your daily routine, and provided, and also that it's something that you actually like doing. There's no point taking, as a lot of people do in January, they think, I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to go start running. And they actually, A, it doesn't fit in with what they're trying to do, and B, they don't like doing it. And if you don't like doing something, don't do it. There's plenty of things out there that you can try that you might like doing. So once things become a habit, whether it is the walking, or whether it's something like, say, a small habit to, eat a piece of fruit instead of your couple of biscuits with your morning coffee 2 or 3 times a week. It's not big. It's something you can do. Once it becomes a habit, it's more easy. Even if you do backslide, it's easier to get back into doing it. One of the things I did with my walking, I talked about social contact. So after a short period of time, I started taking my phone out with me. And what I would do then would be to then ring these various people that I hadn't spoken to for a long period of time and to talk to them while I was on the phone. Mm-hmm. So instead of sitting at home, and family members as well, so people I would normally catch up with, and check up on. So instead of sitting at home for 20 minutes, half an hour talking to them, I would talk to them whilst I was out walking. So I was we were all benefiting from it. The nice thing about walking is that if you can be mindful about your walking and actually look around and watch what you do, what's going on, you watch the seasons change as well. So no 2 walks are ever really the same. There's always something different to see. So you're watching the world turning, and the motion of walking turns over the pebbles in your mind. There is evidence that sort of motion has a stimulatory effect on the creative sides of our brain. And you use the word creation, and people often, or being creative, and people think of, well, I used to anyway, think of, people doing crafty things or art or, whatever. But actually, solving problems requires creativity. So I could often go out with a problem on my mind and come back, and miraculously the solution was there. Somehow or other, the pebbles had turned over, and it's, you know, I'd been presented with, a different way of dealing with it. It's walking's great for your mental health, so it helps put everything else in perspective. So that I think I didn't. Why did I think I chose to walk because it was the simplest, most easiest thing I could do from home. And it doesn't require much effort, you know, a pair of comfortable shoes and maybe a waterproof if that's what you need, something warm on. You can do it anytime, anywhere, for most people to do. So overcoming any boredom or irritation, I didn't find that difficult because I enjoyed doing it. But you do need to enjoy doing it. And you also, as I said before, you need to perceive that there's a benefit there to you as well. And there's a benefit for other people. So for people like me who had children at home who you might think they're irritating you, they might think you're irritating them. Actually, for me, going out and doing what then became, 30 minutes exercise or more was a benefit because I was a better person when I came back into the home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you benefit, they benefit, and you're getting and whilst you're on the run, as you say, on the walk in this case, you're able to catch up with people that you may not have necessarily called as well, so they're benefiting as well. So everyone is winning in this situation, and it's it's really interesting because obviously recording this at the time we are, as you mentioned, a lot of people have as New Year's resolutions, lose weight, go running, whatever it may be. But there's usually a health element to most people's resolutions on that side. But I think when people start doing this, they don't then envisage, becoming a Guinness World Record holder and moving.
No.
So how did you get to that? How did you get to that stage? Because that's the bit that I'm really interested in as well. Is obviously, so you start on this journey going out for half an hour walks. This gradually, obviously it builds up over time. But moving from that to the Land's End to John O'Groats, 875 miles, at the age of 60 is pretty. Yeah. How did that build up to that level?
Yes. So if anybody had told me what would 12 years ago now that I would have be doing that, I would have not only disbelieved them, but so no pun intended, run a mile in the other direction. I developed this love of the mountains and found the long distance hiking, running through Sandra, my friend who set up the running group. And then I had I met other people as well, but I also had a friend who was very much into adventure racing and ultra running. He's somewhat younger than me, but he introduced me and supported me in entering a number of events. For which I went out and trained, and I'd done a 50-mile event in 2014, which I'd found quite hard, but I'd done it, and I did it again the following year. But the company who's put that event on announced a coast-to-coast event along this route I mentioned earlier, which they were going to put on in 2016. And I read this email that they sent out with a 190-mile route on it. And I thought, oh my goodness, who in their right minds could do that? And all I could envision at the time was a lot of young, fit young men racing across the country. And I just thought, that's obviously not for me. I didn't even think, in a different lifetime I might have done it. But there was something about it that stuck with me, and a little voice on my shoulder who gets me into all sorts of trouble said, you know what, this could be sponsorship worthy. So this was in the end of 2015, and in the June of that year, my first granddaughter had been born. But as I mentioned earlier, her grandfather had died back in 2007, and she would never know him, he would never know her. And it occurred to me that, as with for many people, they quite often want to do something to try and help relieve the same pain for other people, in whatever way. So I thought about it, and I thought, oh, I wonder if, anyway, 190 miles, it just seemed daunting at the time. But I rang, I have what I call my three wise men, whom I talk to about my daft ideas. and I rang the race organizer, and I said, what do you think? What would you think if I entered this race? And he just laughed, as he often does at my ideas. And then I rang my other young friend, and there was a sharp intake of breath down the phone, but I considered, well, possibly, yes. Anyway, that's what I did. I entered the event, and I did it. I recce'd it, and I did it and raised money for the brain tumour charity. And I had no idea whether it was going to be possible to complete it. I had no idea. I literally had no idea. I'd never done a multi-day event before. I'd never gone more than 20 hours, I think, at that point in an event. But I did complete it, and having completed it, that then opened up all sorts of ideas which were around, okay, if this body can do that, what else can it do? I was conscious that I was going to be 60 in a few years' time, and having worked with older people predominantly as a medic, I'm very much aware of how miserable life can be if you have ill health. I was also a trustee with Age UK for 5 years in South Lakeland, and I chaired the Health and Wellbeing Forum for local government here. So I've seen it from a number of different perspectives. And one of the concerns for me is that a lot of the long-term health problems that people have are largely preventable. So what I wanted to do was to try and raise awareness of that. And I thought, well, how can I couple my being 60 with my running, which I enjoy, and make life meaningful in some way for other people? And I decided that I could raise awareness of healthy aging and the need for action for healthy aging if I did something big. and that big thing came. I talked to a lot of people about what was possible, but it was through supporting somebody else doing their own coast to coast event, and a conversation I had with her. This was somebody I'd only met on that day, actually, because I'd offered to support them via when I knew what they were doing, because they were raising money for the brain tumour charity for a young mother who was sadly affected by the disease. And I lighted upon the idea of John O'Groats Land's End, because a lot of people, everybody from the tip of one tip to the other tip of the country is affected by long-term health conditions. The message is ubiquitous. And I felt it was a huge enough challenge that I'd see whether I could do it. That's how that came. That's how the idea came about. I'd set up a social enterprise as well, because I want to which unfortunately is dormant at the moment, because it's been really hard to raise funding for existing charities, let alone social enterprises that are new. Because what I'd actually like to do is to set up a trusted resource that can educate and inform, and also provide people with challenges and support to do those challenges to improve their own quality of life as they age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, what you're mentioning there, it goes back to what you said earlier on. It's enjoying, what you're doing, but it's also linked to causes that are close to your heart as well, which helps the drive and motivation, I guess, as well. When you have those days where it's harder to get on track with things, you're doing it for other people and not just yourself as well. And, I mean, obviously, a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this are people from outside the UK. So they're not going to be, some of them may not know what John O'Groats to Land's End actually is, but it is 875 miles. So we're not talking, a marathon or a marathon distance here. It's a bit more than that. And it's, obviously, it's such a huge challenge, as you mentioned yourself. And I guess I can't even imagine the elation you must have felt when you finished the event. And I guess, in retrospect, when you look back at it now, is there anything you feel you learned about yourself from competing with yourself, I guess, in such an event?
I think in terms of learning, of the lessons that I learned, it's more of a tick in the box really for planning and preparation. I spent about 18 months planning. Fundamentally, I'm an analyst, and I started off my approach to how am I going to do this with a risk assessment, which started with what can possibly go wrong, and looking at all aspects of that. From based as a medic, I have an understanding of the physiology, and having done a number of endurance events, I know how that particular trauma affects the body, so I knew what to expect. So it's a question of how do I mitigate some of the impacts of that. But also looking at injury, looking at the weather, looking at the things like diet, looking at the route, looking at the support teams. And there is a saying, isn't there, that no plan, no matter how good, survives contact with the enemy. And likewise, I did develop injury fairly early on, but all of that planning and preparation paid off because I had an answer there with me in the motorhome, within the crew, to actually support me and to be able to continue, even with injury, and to complete the event. Wasn't maybe as quickly as I, or in the best shape as I might have wanted to, but that was a big learning point for me. Something I learned about myself was there doesn't seem to be, however bad you think it is and however much you think you can put up with, there is a depth to one's personal grit that certainly in my case, I've yet to fathom. Your resilience grows according to the experiences that it has. I was in a huge amount of pain. I won't deny that from all bits of my body, whether that, not just the injury, but also from the fact that the muscles become weak over that period of time in running, particularly running on road. But the brain, you talk the brain around in the right mindset. You can talk the brain around and get it to keep going for you. And that was something that I hadn't expected to experience that level of that degree of pain, but I hadn't expected to be able to overcome it in that way. So that was a good learning point. It doesn't matter how bad it gets, it is possible to somehow get through it. I also found the kindness of strangers. Something over 200 people came out to support me, and they weren't all people that I knew down through the route. So, and they would bring gifts for me, or cakes and scones and things for the crew. So really, really, not just let's go out and see this person, but, being thoughtful and kind about everybody, who was around me. So that was lovely. And I have photographs, I think, of most of them. So, which is great. And the crew themselves work harder than you do. All I have to do is put one foot in front of the other. They're having to, look after watering me, feeding me, keeping me warm, keeping me dry. We had some horrendous weather, both in Scotland and then certainly down in Cornwall, where crew might have to double back so that they can actually give you a complete change of clothes, even only 10, 15 minutes after they've just seen you, because the heavens have just opened and completely soaked you. so teamwork. It's not an individual, so it may be me that has a certificate with my name on it, but I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for the fantastic team and dedicated team that I had around me. That none of us do anything in isolation, whoever we are. So. Yeah.
No, I mean, it does bring on a good point, relating to teams that I think actually is relevant for a lot of businesses at the moment. A lot of leaders are trying to work out how to get the most from their teams and how to manage people, I guess, remotely. And I suppose, in that situation you were in, having the people around you and knowing what they were doing to help you to achieve this goal, I guess that then had the impact of, increasing your resilience as well and increasing your drive to get it done, because it wasn't then just yourself that, not finishing it. It would have been harder to stop, because you knew all these other people around you. So,
absolutely. That desire not to let anybody down. And it wasn't just about the team either, because I was carrying a tracking device with me. So that's how people found me to come out and see me en route. But so they could watch my dot on the screen moving slowly down the country. And there was a point where I'd used up whatever other techniques I'd been employing to keep going. And there was a point where I simply focused on making my dot move south. Because I knew there were people out there watching. So I think one of the other things for me is that I chose to do that. I chose to go out there and do that run. There are many, many people around the world who go travel on foot with their families, kids on their back, their few possessions, to escape all kinds of atrocities and horrors, and they don't have the luxury of people looking after them and warm clothes and shoes, extra shoes to change into and so on. So I absolutely had to complete that.
So these external forces coming into play to keep mental, again, something you mentioned earlier, mental fitness was key to it. Keep pushing you on, and although your body might have been telling you to stop, it was the mental drive that got you through, and the support of the people around you, all coming together to hit this goal, which is, we're relating this to a run, but the reality is this can relate to business or whatever situation people are in. If you've got good people around you, you've got that drive, you're enjoying what you're doing, then you can achieve these things if you take one day at a time, these small steps. So keep that dot moving south. That's it. It's so I guess also, not satisfied with that, 2 years later, you then also did the 62 at 62. So which, the 62 Lake District peaks. So, was this, you just felt, okay, you just wanted to, get something else, another string to the bow as well. Huh?
I'd always thought that I was never going to be. I'm not a fast runner, and I'd always thought that I would never be up to the task of completing one of the mountain marathons, mountain challenges, as it were, that are around to be done. But something called the Steve Parr Round, which is the 61 Lake District peaks of 2,500 feet or more, has been done not very many times. And I supported, in part, a friend to do it in October 2020. And the idea grew. I thought, oh, if I had an extra one, I'm going to be 62 next year, so I could have one more peak as close to 2,500 as possible. I wonder if I could train myself to get around it. Now, the idea is doing it in 48 hours, and I would never have a chance of doing that. But actually, as a personal challenge, 62 at 62 wasn't about doing it in a particular timescale. It was simply doing it because it was 116 miles and 46,400 feet of ascent, I think, in the end, which is a huge amount of up and down. And there are lots of there are other mountain challenges which pick off, you might pick off all the summits in a range, but this one was just picking off the highest one. So it was a real challenge. So yes, I did that in June, at the beginning of June. I'd hoped to have had 4 or 5 months to train for it, but with COVID lockdown coming in the beginning of January last year, I lost 3 months. So I was nowhere near as fit and strong as I had hoped to be. But I did do it, and it was great fun. And what was really, it's all about raising awareness of Action for Healthy Aging and the fact that you're never too old to take these things on. They might not look like they would have done if I was 20, 30 or 40. As I say, I could never do it in a 48-hour timescale, but I can still do it. And I'm not an elite runner. I don't even look like a runner. For anybody who sees the film, I certainly don't look like some of these mountain goats that we see running around. But it's not about that. But what was lovely was the fact that, again, the people that came out to support me doing it, some of them I hadn't, because of COVID, I hadn't seen for over 2 years. And it was just so nice to have them there, to be able to catch up, to be up in the mountains. We had some great weather during the daytimes, not so good during a couple of the nights. But and it was, it was completed. And there is a small film which just shows people what it was like.
Yeah, so what we'll do with the podcast, we'll make sure we add the link to the film with the podcast. I put it on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, actually, just to let people know that you were joining the podcast today, and so we'll put it on there again so people can see the short video, which also has is doing very well, won some awards, and it's getting a lot of interest out there as well. So there's no stopping you. That's but I guess one of the things that I thought it'd be quite interesting to talk to you about, given that it's a recruitment podcast and a lot of our listeners are C-level executives in multinational companies, and clearly there's a big drive on diversity and inclusion at the moment. I think that has become more prevalent because of the situation that we've all been in the last couple of years. Now, we've had a number of people and ran a number of events around diversity and inclusion that's more probably focused on the area of gender than anything else. But what we've not really spoken to anybody about is the age situation, and it is something that's it's a challenge, I think, for job seekers. It's a challenge for companies, and given a lot of your events are linked to age, your world record is linked to what you did, but also to age as well. I thought it made sense to ask you a bit about this as well, and combine the sporting and the business background that you have. So, I suppose the question would be, if you're putting yourself in a company, multinational company, what advice would you give to these companies when it comes to age and diversity and inclusion, and how they can maybe improve their approach to this part of it?
I think my approach to that question would be from my experience with health, and that's where my sort of expertise is. So my mission really is to raise awareness of the need to take action for healthy aging, and using my story alongside that health experience to encourage, motivate, and inspire people to make that, to take their own small steps. Mental and physical health are the two most important assets that we have, and I believe that we need to invest in them as effectively a health pension, in the same way that we invest in our financial pension for our future monetary security. And employers have a huge part to play in this health investment for their employees, which not only brings benefits for the employees, but also for the organisations and for the wider community. So I guess it plays into their corporate and social responsibility mission as well. So just a couple of statistics here then, if I may, just to illustrate the scale of my concerns. I won't put too many statistics out there. But data published by the King's Fund in 2015 showed that under the age of 40, just 14% of people had at least one long-term condition. But over the age of 60, that rose to 60%. So it went from 3 in 20 people under the age of 40 to 3 in 5 people over the age of 60. Now, many of these long-term conditions, I know from experience, are largely preventable. We're talking things like obesity, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, lung conditions, anxiety, depression. Problems also lead to musculoskeletal conditions that may produce mobility problems and then potentially affect people's personal independence. Another aspect for me is that globally, a variety of factors increasingly affect the ability of healthcare systems to deliver. There is an increasing capacity gap between demand and the ability to supply, and some of that comes from age demographics, the cost of care, whether it's pharmaceuticals or treatments, which all result from increasingly successful R&D. But they do have a cost. A significant limiting factor is the workforce and the healthcare workforce. And I think we said earlier that in the UK, we've had 100,000 vacancies in healthcare for over 2 years now, which includes some 40 to 50,000 nurses, 10,000 plus doctors, and so on. So the problems aren't new, but they have been exacerbated by COVID, and none of it's going to get sorted out soon. So let me just have a look. There is another little fact that I've got somewhere, which I will just refer to because I never remember it exactly. So between 2018 and 2037, the proportion of the population in work to support those of older age will decrease. There are an estimated 308 people of pensionable age for every 1,000 people of working age in 2016. By 2037, that's projected to increase to 365 people. So that's, I think, something like a 16% increase in the number of people that those working age people have got to support. So we have a increasing older workforce because people can now work longer, and a decreasing younger workforce because we just don't have we just haven't had the births coming into getting to an age where they can support the workforce. So back to employers, I think with the workforce ageing, employers need a productive workforce. If we've got that level of long-term conditions, then the likelihood is that that older workforce is going to need more time off sick as those conditions affect their daily lives. But we also know that studies have shown that healthy individuals are happier than those that have health problems, or are happier if they've got their health conditions under control. So a healthy workforce is more likely to be a happy and productive one. And employers have options to assess their workforce needs and to design and develop and deliver some forms of employee health assistance programs that will produce benefits for everyone. And so I think I believe that that's where employers should be looking to find ways to increase and to embrace the inclusion of all of those workers for the future. And there are, potentially quite a few options to assess the workforce needs. And I probably can't go into any of those here, but I'd be very happy to talk to people if they wanted to. But in terms of inclusion and diversity, I think we have to recognise that we do have these problems, and until we do need to try and work to improve the health of everybody. And I think, certainly people with mental health often feel stigmatised, regardless of what's in place, but also increasingly musculoskeletal problems and so on. But if we can do something, if we can put employee assist programs in that benefits those employees, then it will benefit the teams and the organisation and productivity and so on. As I say, I'm very happy to chat to anybody if they feel that they'd just like to explore this sort of slightly clunky explanation.
No, but it's really interesting. I mean, because the big takeout there is, I think you mentioned there that people are healthier in their mind and body. They're usually then happier, and then they're more productive in the workspace. They're a better team player, which then raises the game of other people. As we talked about with your journey as well. So it's a win-win for everybody to try and look at ways of improving this. I think when this subject comes up with some clients or individuals we know, a company may say, well, we've got a gym, we have a yoga instructor, we have meditation classes, but they're not as well attended as they thought they might be when they were doing an employer survey at the start of the year. And I think so much of it seems. It does come from the individual and changing the habits. I know it goes back to what you were talking about yourself earlier, but you had a life-changing situation. What happened to your family, and then new habits came around from that. And I think when people have that, then you do see the habits bring in, and then you don't really think about what you're doing because they just come almost a natural thing for you to do. But then and this isn't just for older people. I think it's for everybody. It's if you make that intention to say, well, I'm gonna do the gym, I'm gonna spend some time reading, I'm gonna do meditation. It might last for a few days, and then because you don't have the right space for it in your diary, or it doesn't turn into a habit then because you maybe take on too much. You put it in the wrong time of the day, and it's so much of it is down to the individual to try and to change it as well. So you have a combination of the company making it as easy as possible for people to change, but then trying to adapt people's mindsets and allowing the people the freedom to do it as well. If you have a gym but people have no space to attend the gym because their diary's backed up 10-12 hours a day, then it's never going to happen. So it's trying to get that balance between having the amenities there but also allowing the flexibility for these things to be used and taken advantage of, really, I guess.
Yeah, I think there are also a number of different modalities as well. So incentives, competition, understanding why it is the 20 ways to kill an idea. So you've got the gym, so why aren't you using it? Why do you choose not to use it? What would help you use it? So there are lots of different ways of coming at the problems that people have. Some of it might stem from taking an initial review of the sickness absence records and looking at the 3 most common causes of sickness absence, and looking at what you can do to impact on those. They're likely to be similar across many organisations, but they may not be. For example, if you've got a predominance of female workers between the age of 40 and 60, menopausal symptoms might well be playing a huge part in what's going on for them. And there's a lot of time and effort being spent in various quarters on looking at how you can improve, recognise and accept that this group of ladies can be highly challenged by some of the symptoms that they experience. So, is there something that you can do to help them? If I look back at my experience, I was in that age group myself. I never really considered at the time that any of those symptoms might be a factor for me. But now I look back and I think about it. Oh yeah, maybe.
And I think just when you were talking there, something I was thinking about as well that I think is important. I mean, I think when over the years when we've had presenters shortlist for roles with companies, if there's been individuals that have been older than let's say the company wanted on the shortlist, one of the pushbacks is, well, they're not going to be the cultural fit because they are 10, 15 years older than the person in the team. But actually, we're given, everything you've been talking about today. The reality is if you're fit, healthy, mentally strong, and you look after yourself, then obviously, you bring that into your personality. And so you can fit into that culture of, let's say it's a group of 40-year-olds if you're 50 or 60 and any age range as we go up, So I think it does have that, by doing these things outside of work, it means there's less challenge also to find the role within a company because you'll bring that drive and motivation into your role and into the teams as well, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's really a case of never judging a book by its cover. Mm-hmm. So, the ultra running world is such a hugely diverse and inclusive community. All ages, all sizes, all backgrounds, all educations, all colours. It's all experiences, and you never know who you might find yourself running with, a small group or just a pair of you for a short period of time and sharing some of the trails and some of the peat bogs or swamps or the weather or whatever it happens to be. And I think one of the great things about participating in a sport where a lot of people are younger than you is that it keeps you young. I have friends who are older than me, and when I have conversations with them, sometimes it comes across to me that they seem to be very focused on the autumn of life because that is the predominance of their social circle. Whereas I think if you've got younger people coming up through your, as a big part of your social circle, that actually helps keep you young because you're still seeing all the heartaches of boyfriend troubles and but weddings and births and so on and so forth. And the other great thing about having younger people around is that you can ask them the technical questions. Am I supposed to do this on my phone? or what does this word mean? Something, you suddenly hear a word that's being used and you think, hang on, I'm not sure I understand that these days.
Sadly, I know what that feels like at the moment. Our son's 8 years old and he's coming out with words I don't even know what the meaning of them are, and he's picking these things up off YouTube and I'm thinking, I don't know what language he's speaking half the time, but but it is true. I mean, it's something that comes up a lot in the podcast is the comment that you become the sum of the people you spend the most time with. And I think if you're surrounding yourself with these individuals when you're out on running or doing something, a hobby or an activity, then you're bound to be influenced by the people you spend the time with, so it's having that young, being young at heart, a young mindset, and surrounding yourself with these types of people will ultimately help you have a happier and hopefully longer life as well, which is what it's all about as well. So now I know you've mentioned a few times the quote, there's 20 ways to kill an idea, and I thought I'd just ask you really maybe to end on what your favorite motivational quote is, but actually when I asked this question, what I want to try and find is one that actually means something to somebody as well, to you as well, because I know there's a lot of good quotes out there, but, if there's a particular quote that's either driven you or motivated, inspired you to go to the next level, it'd be good to hear what that might be.
I do. I have a few of them actually that I remind myself of on a regular basis. The one that the Running Granny quotes is that you're never too old to set a new goal or dream a new dream, because I think that is probably the biggest response I get from people who are a bit older when I'm trying to suggest that when I suggest they might like to do stuff. They say, oh, what you're doing is really great, but I couldn't do it. And I said, well, actually, yes, you could. As I said before, it might not look like it would have done in your earlier years, but you can still do it or find a way to do it. So whether that's going back to play football or hockey or whatever, there's walking football, there's walking netball, those sorts of things. It's just a question of asking, ask the question, there will be somebody around to give you an answer. I'm quite like, I'm quite a fan of Einstein. And one of the things that he said is something that I've actually said similar of myself, which is that I've no special talents. I'm just passionately curious. And I am curious about so many things. But the other thing that he said was that only those who attempt the absurd can achieve the impossible. So, which really sums up some of the things that I have done and where I might have, looking from the ground at up the mountain, as it were. You have to just take those small steps to get there. And I suppose the one the quote that I like most of all that sums that up, which is that water cuts through rock, not because of its power, but because of its persistence. So you just have to keep plugging away and you will eventually get to where you're wanting to go.
I really like that, because then that brings us back to almost where we started as well, by taking those small steps each day, and that's it. You will get to where you want to go, which that's great. And it's obviously, it's been amazing to have this time with you on the podcast today, Angela. I mean, it's just hugely inspiring what you've achieved, and to know there's even more around the corner. It makes my 3 mile a day jog seem nothing, but those small steps, you never know. That's it. One day I'll be joining you on these 800-mile runs. So if any of the listeners want to reach out, connect with you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, they can do so through. I'm on Facebook and on Instagram as if they go look for @TheRunningGranny, and I have a website called therunninggranny.co.uk, and I think there's a link to an email address on there if they want to get in touch with me via that. But very, very happy to speak to anybody who feels that anything that I've done or any of my skills might be of help to them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure there'll be quite a number of people reaching out to you from Holland and Switzerland as well, which is where a lot of our listeners are. So I know, get ready for the response on these, Angela. And that'd
be lovely.
We'll make sure we put the links on the podcast as well, so it's easy for people to connect. And I guess all that's left for me to say is, again, a huge thanks for being on the show today. Really enjoyed it. Learned a lot from you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, thanks very much for having me on. It's always good to have my brain cells sort of tested on particularly on why I do some of these things. So thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.